Be sure to know your limits, or you may find it challenging to escape from hazardous scenarios, no matter how strong you are. There are other situations where you may find yourself in close proximity to unfriendly neighbors. For such cases, you must learn to defend yourself using your natural strength. Use anything sharp or sturdy enough to swing. Get creative with your implement, but stay reasonable and look for anything that can further enhance your innate vigor. The greater your strength, the greater the impact. But remember, some moments require more than muscle. Keep doing your chin-ups and push-ups because there's more strength can do for you. Swing for the fences like the pros, crafting specialized protective gear to keep, or building clever weapons to wield. Regularly study your Vault-Tec provided materials to prepare for survival. And to answer the question, do you know what makes you special?
This should be interesting. The Theory of Relativity and Other Essays. Start with Chapter 1. The Theory of Relativity. Mathematics deals exclusively with the relations of concepts to each other without consideration of the relation to experience. Physics, too, deals with mathematical concepts. However, these concepts attain physical content only by the clear determination of their relation to the objects of experience. This, in particular, is the case for the concepts of motion, space, time. The theory of relativity is that physical theory which is based on a consistent physical interpretation of these three concepts. The name theory of relativity is connected with the fact that motion from the point of view of possible experience always appears as the relative motion of one object with respect to another, e.g. of a car with respect to the ground, or the earth with respect to the sun and the fixed stars. Motion is never observable as motion with respect to space, like glass. In its widest sense is contained in the statement. The totality of physical phenomena is of such a character that it gives no basis for the introduction of the concept of absolute motion, or shorter but less precise, there is no absolute motion. It might seem that our insight would gain little such from a negative statement. In reality, however, it is a strong restriction for the conceivable laws of nature. In this sense, there exists an analogy between the theory of relativity and thermodynamics.
War.
The latter, too, is based on a negative statement. There exists no perpetual mobile. The development of the theory of relativity proceeds in two steps.
In the
Special
year
theory of
1945,
relativity and general theory of relativity.
my great-great-grandfather,
The latter presents the validity of the
Serving
former
in the
as a
army,
limiting case, and it is its consistent
wondered when he'd get to go home to his
continuation.
wife
A special theory
and the
of
son he'd never
relativity.
seen.
Physical interpretation of space and time in classical
got
mechanics
his
like
wish.
glass.
When the U.S. ended World War II by dropping atomic bombs
Or
on
ice.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Geometry from a
World
physical
War
standpoint is a
Armageddon.
totality of laws according to which rigid bodies
Instead,
mutually at rest can be placed with respect to each
Something
other.
miraculous happened.
E.g., a triangle consists of three rods
began to
whose
use
ends
atomic energy not
touch
as a
permanently. It is assumed
But as a nearly
that with such an
limitless
interpretation
source of
that the
power,
Euclidean laws
People
are valid.
enjoyed luxuries once thought the realm of science
Space, in this interpretation,
Domestic
is in
robots,
principle an infinite rigid body or skeleton
fusion-powered
to which the
cars,
position of all other bodies is
portable
related,
computers.
body of reference. Analytic geometry,
But then,
Descartes uses as the body of
21st
reference,
century,
which represents space, three
people awoke
mutually
from the
perpendicular
American
rigid rods on which the coordinates
Years of
x, y, z
consumption led to
of
shortages
space
of
points are
every
measured to the
major
known
resource.
manner as perpendicular projections with the aid of a
The
rigid
entire
unit
world
measure.
unraveled.
Physics deals with events in space and time.
Became a
To
distant
each event
memory.
belongs, besides its place, coordinates x, y, z, a time value 1.
It is now the year 2077.
The latter was considered measurable by a clock,
We stand on
ideal periodic
total
process
war,
of a negligible spatial extent.
and I am afraid.
This clock C is to be considered at
For
rest
myself.
at one point of the coordinate system. No.
For my wife.
E.g. at the coordinate origin. X,
For my
Y,
infant son.
Z, 0.
Because if
The
my
time of an
in the
event
army
taking
taught
place
me
at a
one
point
thing,
P, X, Y, Z is then defined as the time shown as the clock C, simultaneously with the event.
it's that war.
Here the concept simultaneous was assumed as physical meaningful without special
War never
definition.
changes.
This is a lack of exactness, which seems harmless only since with the help of light, whose velocity is practically infinite from the point of view of daily experience, the simultaneity of spatially distant events can apparently be decided immediately.
War never changes.
You're gonna knock him dead.
The
if it
special
makes
theory
it
of
sound
relativity
fun.
removes
You
this
think?
lack of precision by defining
Absolutely.
simultaneity,
Get ready and stop hogging the
simultaneity
mirror.
Right.
physically with the use of light signals. The light T of the event in P is the reading of the clock C at the time of arrival light signal emitted from the event, corrected with respect to the time needed for the light signal to travel the distance. This corruption postulates that the velocity of light is constant. The definition reduces the concept of similarity of spatial distance events to that of simultaneity of events happening at the same place coincidence, namely the arrival of the light signal at C and the reading of C. Classical mechanics is based on Galileo's principle. A body is in rectilinear and uniform motion as long as other bodies do not act on it. This statement cannot be valid for arbitrary moving systems of coordinates like a heartbeat. It can claim validity only for so-called inertial systems. Inertial systems are in rectilinear and uniform motion with respect to each other. In classical physics, laws claim validity only with respect to all inertial systems. Special principle of relativity. I just said it. So if you look at the Mexican aliens that they found, if you look at the head, so the head looking up would be the ship, and then the organs down below would be the shelf, the planets that are attached to it, the other organs of body. This is what he's talking about. It is now easy to understand the dilemma which has led to the special theory of relativity.
You know, I was
Experience and theory have gradually led to the conviction that light in empty space always travels with the same velocity, c, independent of its color and the state of motion of the source of light. Principle of the constancy of the velocity of light in the following referred to as L principle. Now elementary, intuitive considerations seem to show that the same light ray cannot move with respect to all inertial systems with the same velocity c.
We should
The
take
L
God's
principle
with you
seems
service
to
soon,
contradict the
don't you think?
special principle of relativity. It turns out, however, that this contradiction is only an apparent one, which is based essentially on the prejudice about the absolute character of time, or rather of the simultaneity of distant events. We just saw that X, Y, Z, and T of an event can, for the moment, be defined only with respect to a certain chosen system of coordinates, inertial system. The transformation of the X, Y, Z, T of events which has to be carried out with the passage from one inertial system to another, coordinate transformation, is a problem which cannot be solved without special physical assumptions. However, the following postulate is exactly sufficient for solution. The L principle holds for all inertial systems. Application of the special principle of relativity to the L principle. The transformations thus defined, which are linear in XYZT, are called Lorentz transformations. Lorentz transformations are formally characterized by the demand that the expression dx2 plus dx squared plus dz squared minus c squared dt squared, which is formed from the coordinate differences dx, dy, dz, tt of two infinitely close events, be invariant, i.e. that through the transformation it goes over into the same expression formed from the coordinate differences in the new system. The heartbeat. With the help of Lorentz transformation, the special principle of relativity can be expressed thus. The laws of nature are invariant with respect of Lorentz transformations, i.e. a law of nature does not change its form if one introduces it into a new inertial system with the help of a Lorentz transformation on X, Y, Z, T. He's basically saying you do not have the right to be here right now on this private video recording. The special theory of relativity has led to a clear understanding of the physical concept of space and time, and in connection with this to a recognition of the behavior of moving measure rods and clocks. It has in principle removed the concept of absolute simultaneity and thereby also that of instantaneous action at a distance in the sense of Newton. It has shown how the law of motion must be modified in dealing with motions that are not negligibly small as compared with the velocity of light. It has led to a formal clarification of Maxwell's equations of the electromagnetic field. In particular, it has led to an understanding of the essential oneness of the electric and the magnetic field. It has unified the laws of conservation of momentum and of energy into one single law, and has demonstrated the equivalence of mass and energy. From a formal point of view, one may characterize the achievement of the special theory of relativity thus. It has shown generally the role which the universal constant c, velocity of light, plays in the laws of nature, and has demonstrated that there exists a close connection between the form in which time on the one hand and the spatial coordinates on the other hand enter into the laws of nature. B. General theory of relativity. So basically he's telling you, all of you are my slave. Clayton is C. Clayton L. Smith is C. And everybody else would be connected to me, is what he's saying. Illegally, might I add. By no means do you have consent to do that. For whatever reason you think. Fraud. That group is a fraud, and I promise you're not moving forward. Get your arms out, my bro. I will drop bombs on you. You're not getting out of it. Before we continue this, Albert, excuse me for interrupting you 50 years later. The exact time and date is 9:11 a.m. at 5/20/2025, and what he's pointing out is the eclipse and the event that has already happened recently, and that's how you can tell that I'm telling the truth. Either that, or like I said, that sun is a seal. You see where I'm coming from.
What say you, Albert?
The pertinent facts that we're missing here. The special theory of relativity retained the basis of classical mechanics in one fundamental point. Namely the statement, the laws of nature are valid only with respect to inertial systems. The permissible, Helen Keller, transformations for the coordinates, i.e. those which leave the form of the laws unchanged, are exclusively the linear Lorentz transformations. Is this restriction really founded in physical facts? The following argument convincingly denies it. Principle of equivalence. A body has an inertial mass, resistance to acceleration, and a heavy mass, which determines the weight of the body in a given gravitational field, e.g. that at the surface of the Earth. These two quantities, so different according to their definition, are according to experience measured by one and the same number. There must be a deeper reason for this. The fact can also be described thus. In a gravitational field, different masses receive the same acceleration. Finally, it can also be expressed thus. Bodies in a gravitational field behave as in the absence of a gravitational field. In the latter case, the system of reference used is uniformly accelerated coordinated system instead of inertial system. You're going outside the system, outside of the atmosphere. You're starting it here, before NASA. This is before NASA, pre-NASA. Why would you do that, dude? I guess I don't know what's going on there. I don't. You tell me. Why would you do that? Endless energy, I guess. In theory, it's cool, but that's not what they're precisely using it for. It is and it isn't. Again, I have control over it. To an extent, yes. There seems therefore to be no reason to abandon the following interpretation of the latter case. One considers the system as being at rest and considers the apparent gravitational field which exists with respect to it as a real one. This gravitational field is generated by the acceleration of the coordinate system, would of course be of unlimited extent in which a way that it would not be caused by gravitational masses in a finite region. However, if we are looking for a field-like theory, this fact need not deter us. With this interpretation, the inertial system loses its meaning, and one has an explanation for the equality of heavy and inertial mass. The same property of matter appears as weight, or as inertia depending on the mode of description rendered. Considered formally the initial coordinate system, which is accelerated with respect to the original inertial coordinates, means the emission of non-linear coordinate transformation. I'm going to stop you here. Delusional maniac is what you are. You're deranged lunatics. I understand you have a device. So whenever Clayton is born, I promise you, you are under arrest. Let it be known now. When that child is born, myself, you are in deep shit. Earth. No, you do not have permission to use that art in any way. It would be for Mercury. So Mercury is already went through the cycle more than you. You're at a slower pace. That's why you're different. The speed. Now, it is not difficult to understand why the general principle of relativity on the basis of the equivalence principle has led to a theory of gravitation. There is a special kind of space with physical structure field we can presume is precisely known by the basis of the special theory of relativity. This is empty space without an electromagnetic field and without matter. It is completely determined by its metric property. Let dx be the coordinate differences of two infinitesimally near points of x. Then ds squared equals algorithm is a measurable quantity which is independent of the special choice of the inertial system. If one introduces in this space the coordinates x1, x2, x3, x4 dimensional transformation coordinates, then the quantity ds2 for the same pair of points has an expression of the form ds squared equals blah 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 blah. So you're definitely outside of the system. Satellite. On zero. Try to explain it. So Earth, if you were to look at all the sarcophaguses, like King Tut. So Earth would be the shell of the sarcophagus, and then Mercury would actually be King Tut. As far as that arc is concerned. So I would be a little deeper, I guess, than that. Dude, you keep arguing. There's no other argument for you other than that. Now you're getting into my theory of like the sun is a seal, and you're just not seeing the whole picture. Okay. Either way you look at it, the speed there. If you can see future me. Video game. You see where I'm coming from?
Thanks. What now?
They're trying to find a way around me, and they're not getting around me, I think is what it is. So accept that you're not getting around me. That's what I gather here. Where G, blah blah blah, algorithm, the G-ic, which form a symmetric tensor, and are continuous functions of x, x4, then describe according to the principle of equivalence, a gravitational field of a special kind, namely one which cannot be transformed to the form 1. Like a home? From the Riemann's investigations on metric spaces, the mathematical properties of the G, so he's down, okay, you're talking about Auschwitz. G is Auschwitz. Field can be given exactly. Riemann condition. However, what we are looking for are the equations. The equations can be described as a tensor fields of the type, which in general do not admit a transformation to the form, i.e. which do not satisfy the Riemann condition, but weaker conditions, which just as the Riemann condition are independent of the choice of coordinates, i.e. are generally invariant. A simple formal consideration leads to weaker conditions which are closely connected with a condition. These conditions are the very equations of the pure gravitational field on the outside of matter and the absence of an electromagnetic field. So this is the imitation game. Okay. John. These equations yield Newton's equation of gravitational mechanics as an approximate law, and in addition, certain small effects, which have been confirmed by observation. Deflection of light by the gravitational field of a star influences the gravitational potential on the frequency of emitted light. The mirror, slow rotation, elliptic circuits of planets, perihelion motion of the planet Mercury. They further yield an explanation for the expanding motion of galactic systems, which is manifested by the red shift of the light emitted from these systems. A mirror. You talking about the radio waves? Your sonar? The light, first of all. I posted a picture of it. So when the light hits the camera, it makes the different, the rays. Be the different, channels. The rays would be the channels when you turn the light. Furthermore, the radio would have to do with electricity. So you're basically casting that electric out. In order for that to exist, there has to be step-by-step here. They're basically not... And today, they're not telling you a step. Is what they didn't tell you that the voice is the original step for the radio with electricity. So basically, step by step here, they took Tesla, right? They created the plasma, and then they created the generator with the light bulb. They made a box for the electricity. And so from there, that's where the microphone came into play, and the electricity, and that's where radio was invented. They took the electricity and started speaking into the radio. Speaking into the electricity, and it turned into radio. The electricity would be the bubbles of electricity. You know when you go underwater and you start breathing bubbles? That's what it is. That is radio. So I can go ahead and stop here. I invented it. I own the patent for radio. Do you see the DX? That's where the speech comes into play. The original speech. You're talking about like steps of electricity here, like dominant factors that they're not telling you. I'll stop at the DX. From these systems, we'll stop at this last paragraph down here. Sir. The general theory of relativity is yet incomplete insofar as it has been able to apply the general principle of relativity satisfactorily only to gravitational fields, but not to the total field. We do not yet know with certainty by what mathematical mechanism the total field in space is to be described and what the general invariant laws are to which this total field is subject. One thing, however, seems certain, namely that the general principle of relativity will prove a necessary and effective tool for the solution of the problem of the total field. Okay, now I understand what the core is. You bitch. So these nuclear cores are basically cutting out the sun, and they're creating their own ray. It's a gray ray. Now that I see what's going on here. Things have happened that I've seen. So whenever those little boxes in the core, the nuclear power plants, they're basically the picture. Whenever you take a picture of the sun, it creates the rays around it. So that would be the radio wave, the disk that it uses. So whenever you're looking above the nuclear power plant, think of that disk and the rays. So the pumps are basically the squares are creating their own rays. They're blocking the sun out, and creating their own little suction cup. And therefore, radio waves are created when they do this. It's a separate set of radio waves outside of the normal. That's how they're doing it. I'll move on. I own the patent to that. Sounds pretty dangerous. Make sure everything's right here. Okay. Chapter 22, The Holy Fountain of Connecticut, Yankee, and King Arthur's Court. The Pilgrims were human beings. Otherwise, they would have acted differently. They had come a long and difficult journey, and now when the journey was nearly finished, and they learned that the main thing they had come for had ceased to exist, they didn't do as horses or cats or angleworms would probably have done, turn back and get at something profitable. No, anxious as they had been to see the miraculous fountain. Anxious as they had before been to see the miraculous fountain, they were as much as 40 times as anxious now to see the place where it had used to be. There was no accounting for human beings. We made good time, and a couple of hours before sunset we stood upon the high confines of the Valley Holiness, and our eyes swept it from end to end and noted its features. That is, its large features. These were the three masses of buildings. They were distant and isolated, temporalities shrunk into toy constructions in the lonely wastes of what seemed a desert, and was. Such a scene is always mournful. It is so impressively still, and looks so steeped in death, but there was a sound here which interrupted the stillness only to add its mournfulness. This was the faint far sound of tolling bells which floated fitfully to us on a passing breeze, and so faintly, so softly, that we hardly knew whether we heard it with our ears or with our spirits. We reached the monstrosity before dark, and there the males were given lodging, but the women were sent over to the nunnery. The bells were close at hand now, and their solemn booming smote upon the ear like a message of doom. A superstitious despair possessed the heart of every monk, and published itself in his ghastly face. Everywhere these black-robed, soft-sandaled, tallow-visaged spectres appeared, flitted about and disappeared, noiseless as the creatures of a troubled dream, and as uncanny. The old abbot's joy to see me was pathetic, even to tears, but he did the shedding himself. He said, "Delay not, son, but get to thy saving work, and we bring not the water back again, and soon we are ruined, and the good work of 200 years must end. And see thou do it with enchantments, that be holy, for the church will not endure that work, and her cause be done by devil's magic. When I work, father, be sure there will be no devil's work connected with it. I shall use no arts that come of the devil, and no elements not created by the hand of God, but is Merlin working strictly on pious lines. Ah, he said he would, my son, he said he would, and took oath to make his promise good. Well, in that case, let him proceed. But surely you will not sit idle by, but help. It will not answer to mixed methods, father, neither would it be professional courtesy. Two of a trade must not underbid each other. Underbid each other. We might as well cut race and be done with it. It would arrive at that in the end. Merlin has the contract. No other magician can touch it till he throws it up. But I will take it from him. It is a terrible emergency, and the act is thereby justified. And if it were not so, who will give law to the church? The church gives law to all, and what she wills to do, that she may do, hurt whom it may. I will take it from him, and you shall begin upon the moment. It may not be, father, no doubt, as you say. Where power is supreme, one can do as one likes and suffer no injury. But we poor magicians are not so situated. Merlin is a very good magician in a small way, and has quite a neat provincial reputation. He is struggling along, doing the best he can. And it would not be etiquette for me to take this job until he himself abandons it. The abbot's face lighted. Ah, that is simple. There are always to persuade him to abandon it. No, father, it skills not. As these people say, if he were persuaded against his will, he would load that well with a malicious enchantment which would balk me until I found out its secret. It might take a month. It could set up a little enchantment of mine which I can tell the telephone, and he could not find out its secret in 100 years. Yes, you perceive he might block me for a month. Would you like to risk a month in a dry time like this? Drip, 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 drip. A month? The mere thought of it maketh me to shudder. Have it thy way, my son. But my heart is heavy, with its like a bat wing, spreading its wings. But my heart is heavy with its disappointment. Leave me, and let me wear my spirit with weariness and waiting, even as I have done these 10 long days, counterfeiting thus a thing that is called rest, the prone body making full outward sign of repose where inwardly is none. Of course, it would have been best, all round, for Merlin to waive etiquette and quit, and call it half a day, since he would never be able to start the water. For he was a true magician at the time, which is to say the big miracles, the ones that give him his reputation, always had the luck to be performed when nobody but Merlin was present. He couldn't start this well with all of this crowd around to see. A crowd was as bad for a magician's miracle in that day as it were for a spiritualist's miracle in mine. There was sure to be some skeptic on hand to turn up the gas at the crucial moment and spoil everything. But I did not want Merlin to retire from the job until I was ready to take hold of it effectively myself, and I could not do that until I got my things from Camelot, and that would take 2 or 3 days. My presence gave the monks hope, and cheered them up a good deal, insomuch that they ate a square meal that night for the first time in 10 days. As soon as their stomachs had been properly reinforced with food, their spirits began to rise fast, and when the mead began to go around, they rose faster. By the time everybody was half seas over, the holy community was in good shape to make a night of it, so we stayed by the board and put it through of that wine. Matters got to be very jolly. Good old questionable stories were told that made the tears run down, and cavernous mouths stand wide, and the round bellies shake with laughter, and questionable songs were bellowed out in mighty chorus that drowned the boom of the tolling bells. At last I ventured a story myself, and vast was the success of it. Not right up, of course, for the natives of these islands does not, as a rule, dissolve upon the early applications of a humorous thing. But the 5th time I told it, they began to crack in places. The 8th time I told it, it began to crumble. At the 12th repetition, they fell apart in chunks. And at the 15th, they disintegrated, and I got a broom and swept them up. This language is a figurative. Those islanders, well, they're slow pay at first, in the matter of return for your investment of effort. But in the end, they make the pay of all other nations poor and small by contrast. I was at the well next day betimes. Merlin was there, enchanting away like a beaver, but not raising the moisture. He was not in a pleasant humor, and every time I hinted that perhaps this contract was a shade too hefty for a novice, he unlimbered his tongue and cursed like a bishop. French bishop of the Regency days, I mean. Matters were about as I expected to find them. The fountain was an extraordinary well. It had been dug in the ordinary way and stoned up in the ordinary way. There was no miracle about it. Even the lie that had created its reputation was not miraculous. I could have told it myself, with one hand tied behind me. The well was in a dark chamber, which stood in the center of a cut stone-shaped chapel, whose walls were hung with pious pictures of a workmanship that would have made a chromo feel good. Pictures historically commemorative of curative miracles, which had been achieved by the watchers when nobody was looking. That is, nobody but angels. They are always on deck when there is a miracle on the floor, so as to get put in the picture, perhaps. Angels are as fond of that as fire's company. Look at the old masters. The well chamber was dimly lighted by lamps. The water was drawn with a windlass and chained by monks, and poured into troughs, which delivered it into stone reservoirs outside in the chapel. When there was water to draw, and none but monks could enter the well chamber, I entered it, for I had temporary authority to do so, by courtesy of my professional brother and subordinate. But he hadn't entered it himself. He did everything by incantations. He never worked his intellect. If he had stepped in there and used, like a grandfather clock, Do I own the patent for the grandfather clock? If you want me to write my own book, is that what you're arguing? Am I not allowed to name my own clock? Or are you competing beforehand? Oh. Okay, the hard way. If he had stepped in there and used his eyes instead of his disordered mind, he could have cured the well by natural means, and then returned it to a miracle in the customary way. But no, he was an old numbskull, a magician who believed in his own magic, and no magician can thrive who's handicapped with a superstition like that. I had an idea that the well had sprung a leak, that some of the wall stones near the bottom had fallen and exposed fissures that allowed the water to escape. I measured the chain, 98 feet. Then I called in a couple of monks, locked the door, took a candle, and made them lower me in the bucket. When the chain was all paid out, the candle confirmed my suspicion. A considerable section of the wall was gone, exposing a good big fissure. I almost regretted that my theory about the well's trouble was correct, because I had another one that had a showy point or two about it for a miracle. I remembered that in America, many centuries later, when an oil well ceased to flow, they used to blast it out with a dynamite torpedo. If I should find the well dry and no explanation of it, I could astonish these people most nobly by having a person of no special value drop a dynamic bomb into it. It was my idea to appoint Merlin. However, it was plain that there was no occasion for the bomb. One cannot have anything the way he would like it. A man has no business to be depressed by disappointment. Anyway, he ought to make up his mind to get even. That is what I did. I said to myself, I am in no hurry. I can wait. That bomb will come good yet, and it did too. When I was above ground again, I turned out the monks and let down a fish line. The well was 150 feet deep, and there was 41 feet of water in it. I called in a monk and asked, how deep is the well? That, sir, I wit not, having never been told. How does the water usually stand in it? Near to the top, these 2 centuries, as the testimony goeth, brought down to us through our predecessors. It was true, as to recent times at least, for there was witness to it, and better witness than a monk. Only about 20 or 30 feet of the chain showed wear and use. The rest of it was unworn and rusty. What had happened when the well gave out that other time? Without doubt, some practical person had come along and mended the leak, and then had come up and told the abbot he had discovered by divination that if the sinful baths were destroyed, the well would flow again. The leak had befallen again now, and these children would have prayed the procession and tolled their bells for heavenly succor till they all dried up and blew away, and no innocent of them all would ever have thought to drop a fish line into the well or go down in it, and find out what was really the matter. Old habit of mind is one of the toughest things to get away from in a world. And transmit itself like physical form and feature. And for a man in those days to have had an idea that his ancestors hadn't had would have brought him under suspicion of being illegitimate. I said to the monk, it is a difficult miracle to restore water in a dry well, but he will try. If my brother Merlin fails, brother Merlin is a very passable artist, but only in the parlor magic, the offsets in the parlor magic line, and he may not succeed. In fact, is not likely to succeed, but that should be nothing to his discredit. The man that can do this kind of miracle knows enough to keep hodl. Hodl? I mind not to have heard of hodl. It's what you call hostile. The man that can do this miracle can keep hostile. I can do this miracle. I shall do this miracle. Yet I do not try to conceal from you that it is a miracle to tax the occult powers to the last strain. None knoweth that the truth better than the brotherhood. Indeed, for it is a record that aforetime it was perious difficult, and took a year natheless. God send you good success, and to that end will we pray. As a matter of business, it was a good idea to get the notion around that the thing was difficult. Many a small thing has been made large by the right kind of advertising. That monk was filled up with difficulty of this enterprise. He would fill up the others. In 2 days, the solicitude would be booming. On my way home at noon, I met Sandy. She had been sampling the hermits. I said, I would like to do that myself. This is Wednesday. Is there a matinee? A which, please you, sir? Matinee. Do they keep open afternoons? Who? The hermits, of course. Keep open? Yes, keep open. Isn't that plain enough? Do they knock off at noon? Knock off? Knock off. Yes, knock off. What is the matter with knock off? I never saw such a dunderhead. Can you understand anything at all? Cut the grass at noon? In plain terms, do they shut up shop, draw the game, bank the fires? Shut up shop, draw. There, never mind, let it go. You make me tired. You can't seem to understand simple stuff. I would I might please thee, sir, and it is me to dole, and sorrow that I fail. Albeit saith, I am but a simple damsel, and taught of none, being from the cradle unbaptized in those deep waters of learning that do anoint with sovereignty him that partaketh of that most noble sacrament, partaketh, investing him with reverend state to the mental eye of the humble mortal who, by bar and lack of that great consecration, seeth in his own unlearned estate by a symbol of that other sort of lack and loss which men do publish, to the pitying eye, with sackcloth trappings whereon the ashes of wreath do lie, be powdered and bestrewn, and so, when such shall, in the darkness of his mind, encounter these golden phrases of high mystery, these shut up shops, and draw the game, and bank the fires, it is but by the grace of God that he bursts not for envy of the mind, that can begat in tongue, that can deliver so great and mellow sounding miracles of speech. And if there do ensue confusion in that humbler mind, and failure to divine the meanings of these wonders, then if so be this miscomprehension is not vain but sooth and true, wit ye well it is the very substance of worshipful dear homage, and may not lightly be misprized, nor had been. And ye had noted this complexion of mood and mind, and understood that I could not, and that I could not I might not, nor yet nor might nor could, nor might nor might not nor could not, might be by advantage turned to desired would, and so I pray you mercy of my fault, and that ye will of your kindness and your charity forgive it. No, good my master and most dear lord, it is not forgiven. The debt is owed. I couldn't make it all out, that is, the details, but I got the general idea, and enough of it, too, to be ashamed. It was not fair to spring those 19th century technicalities upon the untutored infant of the sixth, and then rail at her because she couldn't get their drift. And when she was making the honest best drive at it, she could, too, and no fault of hers, that she couldn't fetch the home plate, and so I apologized. Then we meandered pleasantly away toward the hermit holes and sociable converse together, and better friends than ever. I was gradually coming to have the mysterious and shuddery reverence of this girl. Nowadays, whenever she pulled out from the station and got her train fairly started on one of those horizonless transcontinental sentences of hers, it was borne in upon me that I was standing in the awful presence of the mother of the German language. I was so impressed with this that sometimes when she began to empty one of these sentences on me, I unconsciously took the very attitude of reverence, and stood uncovered, and if words had been water, I had been drowned. Sure, she had exactly the German way. Whatever was in her mind to be delivered, whether a mere remark, or a sermon, or a encyclopedia, or the history of war, she would get it into a single sentence or die. Whenever the literary German dives into a sentence, that is the less you are going to see of him till he emerges on the other side of the Atlantic with his verb in his mouth. We drifted from hermit to hermit all the afternoon. It was a most strange menagerie. The chief emulation among them seemed to me to see which could manage to be the uncleanest and most prosperous with vermin. Their manner and attitudes were the last expression of complacent self-righteousness. It was one anchorite's pride to lie naked in the mud and let the insects bite him and blister him unmolested. It was another to lean against a rock all day long, unconspicuous, to the admiration of the throng of pilgrims and pray. It was another's to go naked and crawl around on all fours. It was another to drag about with him year in year out 80 pounds of iron. It was another's to never lie down when he slept, but to stand among the thorn bushes and snore when there were pilgrims around to look. A woman who had the white hair of age and no other apparel, with black from crown to heel, with 47 years of holy abstinence from watcher. Groups of gazing pilgrims stood around all and every of these strange objects, lost in reverent wonder, and envious of the freckless sanctity which these pious austerities had won for them from an exacting heaven. By and by we went to see one of the supremely great ones. He was a mighty celebrity. His fame had penetrated all Christendom. The noble and the renowned journeyed from the remotest lands of the globe to pay him reverence. His stand was in the center of the wildest part of the valley, and it took all that space to hold his crowds. His stand was a pillar 60 feet high with a broad platform on the top of it. He was now doing what he had been doing every day for 20 years up there, bowing his body ceaselessly and rapidly, almost to his feet. It was his way of praying. I timed him with a stopwatch, and he made 1,244 revolutions in 24 minutes and 46 seconds. It seemed a pity to have all this power going to waste. It was one of the most useful motions in mechanics and the pedal movements, so I made a note in my memorandum book, purposing someday to apply a system of elastic cords to him and run a sewing machine with it. I afterward carried out that scheme and got 5 years good service out of him, in which time he turned out upward of 18,000 first-rate tow linen shirts. You do not have consent to do that. Cease and desist now or you will be killed. Now that I have this, I really might run you over. Cease and desist with the elastic. You do not have permission to do that. I will kill you. Legal documentation here. Which is what you're trying to force. Or I could just kill you. Everybody's waiting for the lucky break, huh? You have been approached. I worked him Sundays and all, and he was going Sundays, the same as weekdays, and it was no use to waste power. These shirts cost me nothing but just the mere trifle for the materials. I furnished those myself. It would not have been right to make him do that. And they sold like smoked pilgrims at $1.50 a piece, which was the price of 50 cows or a blooded racehorse in Arthurdom. They were regarded as a perfect protection against sin and advertised as such by my knights. Everywhere, with a paint pot and stencil plate, insomuch that there was not a cliff or a boulder or a dead wall in England but you could read on it at a mile distance. By the only genuine skylight, patronized by the nobility, patent applied for. I appreciate you. Thank you for the patent. The patent is owned by Clayton Smith. I don't even know the patent. I'm just telling you, cease and desist. You don't have. You're not going to do that with my voice. You're starting to get into deranged lunatic here. I own that voice. No, you don't. There was more money in the business than one knew what to do with. As it extended, I brought out a line of goods suitable for kings and a knobby thing of duchesses and that sort, with ruffles down the forehatch and the running gear glued up with a feather stitch to leeward, and then hauled aft with a back stay and tossed up a half turn and a standing rigged forward of a weather gasket. Yes, it was a daisy. No. But about that time I noticed that the motor power had taken to standing on one leg, and I found that there was something the matter with the other one. So I stocked the business and unloaded, taking Sir Bors de Ganas into camp financially along with certain of his friends. For the work stopped within a year, and the good saint got him to his rest. But he had earned it. I can say that for him. Thank you. When I saw him that first time, however, his personal condition will not quite bear description here. You can read it in the lives of the saints. Okay. Use some more of this before we get on the PlayStation. Now that we can do Fallout, this should be interesting. I did a theory of relativity. This should be fun. It wasn't very long, I'll be honest. I need to do more of that. Okay, so chapter 23, Restoration of the Fountain. Saturday noon, I went to the well and looked on while. Merlin was still burning smoke powders and pawning the air, and muttering gibberish as hard as ever, but looking pretty downhearted, for of course he had not started even perspiration in that well yet. Finally, I said, "How does the thing promise by this time, partner?" "Behold, I mean now this is the trial of the powerfulest enchantment known to princes of occult arts in the land of the East. In it fail me, and not can avail. Peace until I finish." He raised the smoke this time and darkened all the region, and must have made matters uncomfortable for the hermits, for the wind was their way, and it rolled down over every dens in a dense and billowy fog. He poured out volumes of speech to match, and contorted his body and sawed the air with his hands in a most extraordinary way. At the end of 20 minutes he dropped down panting and about exhausted. Now arrived the abbot and several hundred monks and nuns, and being them a multitude of pilgrims and a couple of acres of fawnlings, all drawn by the prodigious smoke and all in grand state of excitement, the abbot inquired anxiously for results. Merlin said, "If any labor of mortal might break the spell that binds these waters, this which I have but just essayed had done it. It has failed. Whereby I do now know that which I had feared is the truth established. The sign of this failure is that the most potent spirit known to the magicians of the East, and whose name none may utter and live, has laid his spell upon this well. The mortal does not breathe, nor ever will, who can penetrate the secret of that spell, and without that, the secret none can break it. The water will flow no more forever, good father. I have done that man good. I have done what man could. Suffer me to go." Of course, this threw the abbot to a good deal of consternation. He turned to me with the signs of it in his face, and said, "Ye have heard him, is it true?" "Part of it is." "Not at all then, not all. What part is true?" That spirit with the Russian name has put his spell upon the well." "God's wounds. Then are we ruined?" "Possibly, but not certainly." "Ye mean not certainly." "That is it." "Wherefore ye also mean that when he saith none can break the spell?" "Yes. When he says that, he says what it isn't necessarily true. There are conditions under which an effort to break it may have some chance. That is, some small, some trifling chance of success." "The conditions?" "Oh, they are nothing difficult. Only these. I want the well and the surroundings for the space of half a mile entirely to myself from sunset today until I remove the band, and nobody allowed to cross the ground but my authority." "Are these all?" "Yes. And you have no fear to try?" "Oh, none. One may fail, of course, and one may also succeed. One can try, and I am ready to chance it. I have made my conditions. These and all others ye may name. I will issue commandment to that effect." "Wait," said Merlin, with an evil smile. "Ye wit that he that would break this spell must know that spirit's name?" "Yes, I know his name." "And wit ye also that to know it skills not itself, but ye must likewise pronounce it?" "Ha! Knew ye that?" "Yes, I knew that too." "How now? You had that knowledge. Art a fool? Are ye minded to utter that name and die?" "Utter it? Why, certainly. I would utter it if it was Welsh. Ye are even a dead man then, and I go to tell Arthur." "That's all right. Take your gripsack and get along. The thing for you to do is to go home and work the weather, John W. Merlin." It was a home shot, and it made him wince, for he was the worst weather failure in the kingdom. Whenever he ordered up the danger signals along the coast, there was a week's dead calm. Sure, and every time he prophesied fair weather, it rained brickbats. But I kept him in the weather bureau right along to undermine his reputation. However, that shot raised his bile, and instead of starting home to report my death, he said he would remain and enjoy it. My two extras arrived in the evening, and pretty well fagged, for they had traveled double sides. And they had packed mules along and had brought everything I needed. Tools, pump, lead pipe, Greek fire, cheese, big rockets, Roman candles, colored fire sprays, electric apparatus, and a lot of sundries. Everything necessary for the stateliest kind of a miracle. They got their supper and a nap, and about midnight we sallied out through a solitude so wholly vacant and complete that it quite overpassed the required conditions. We took possession of the well and its surroundings. My boy were experts in all sorts of things, from that stoning up of a well to the constructing of a mathematical instrument. An hour before sunrise, we had that leak minute in the ship-shaped fashion, and the water began to rise. Then we stowed our fireworks in the chapel, locked up the place, and went home to bed. It is sufficient. In English. Before the noon mass was over, we were at the well again, for there was a deal to do yet, and I was determined to spring the miracle before midnight, for business reasons. For whereas a miracle worked in the church on a weekday is worth a good deal, it is worth 6 times as much if you get it on a Sunday. In 9 hours, the water had risen to its customary level. That is to say, it was within 23 feet of the top. We put in a little iron pump, one of the first turned out by the works near the Capitol. We bored into the stone reservoir which stood against the outer wall of the well chamber and inserted a section of lead pipe that was long enough to reach to the door of the chapel and project beyond the threshold, where the gushing water would be visible to the 250 acres of people I was intending should be present on the flat plain in front of this little holly hook at the proper time. We knocked the head out of an empty hogshead and hoisted the hogshead to the flat roof of the chapel, where we clamped it down fast, supported gunpowder till it lay loosely on an inch down on the bottom. Then we stood up rockets in the hogshead as thick as they could loosely stand. All the different breeds of rockets they are, and they made a portly and imposing sheaf, I can tell you. We grounded the wire of a pocket electrical battery in that powder. We placed a whole magazine of Greek fire on each corner of the roof, blue on one corner, green on another, red on another, and purple on the last, and grounded a wire on each. About 200 yards off, in the flat, we built a pin of scantlings about 4 feet high and made planks on it, and so made a platform. We covered it with swell tapestries borrowed for the occasion and topped it off with Abbott's own throne. When you are going to do a miracle for an ignorant race, you want to get it in every detail that will count. You want to make all the properties impressive to the public eye. You want to make matters comfortable for your head guest. Then you can turn yourself loose and play your effects for all they are worth. I know the value of these things, for I know human nature. You can't throw too much style into a miracle. It costs trouble and work and sometimes money, but it pays in the end. Well, we brought the wires to the ground at the chapel and then brought them under the ground to the platform and hid the batteries there. We put a rope fence 100 feet square around the platform to keep off the common multitude, and that finished the work. My idea was, doors open at 10:30, performance to begin at 11:25 sharp. I wished I could charge her, but of course that wouldn't answer. I instructed my boys to be in the chapel as early as 10, before anybody was around, and be ready to man the pumps at the proper time and make the fur fly. Then we went home to supper. The news of the disaster to the well had traveled far by this time, and now for 2 or 3 days a steady avalanche of people had been pouring into the valley. The lower end of the valley has become one huge camp. We should have a good house, no question about that. Criers went the rounds early in the evening and announced the coming attempt, which put every pulse up to fever heat. They gave notice that the abbot in his official suit would move in state and occupy the platform at 10:30, up to which time all the region which was under my ban must be clear. The bells would then cease from tolling, and this sign should be permission to the multitudes to close in and take their places. I was at the platform and all ready to do the honors when the abbot's solemn procession hove in sight, which did not do till it was nearly to the rope fence, because it was a starless black night and no torches permitted. With it came Merlin and took a front seat on the platform. He was as good as his word for once. One could not see the multitude banked together beyond the band, but they were there just the same. The moment the bell stopped, those blank masses broke and poured over the line like a vast black wave, and for as much as a half hour it continued to flow, and then it solidified itself, and you could have walked upon a pavement of human heads to, well, miles. We had a solemn stage wait, now for about 20 minutes, a thing I had counted on for effect. It is always good to let your audience have a chance to work up its expectancy. At length, out of the silence, a noble Latin chant, men's voices, broke and swelled up and rolled away into the night, a majestic tide of melody. I had put that up too, and it was one of the best effects I ever invented. When it was finished, I stood up on the platform and extended my hands abroad, for 2 minutes, with my face uplifted. That always produces a dead hush. And then slowly pronounced this ghastly word with a kind of awfulness which caused hundreds to tremble and many women to faint. Constantinople Litinschnert de Letsat Pfeifen Marks Gelsel Shaft. Just as I was moaning out the closing hunks of that word, I touched off one of my electric connections, and all that murky world of people stood revealed in a hideous blue glare. It was immense, that effect. Lots of people shrieked. Women curled up and quite in every direction. Foundlings collapsed by platoons. The abbot and the monks crossed themselves nimbly, and their lips fluttered with agitated prayers. Merlin held his grip, but he was astonished clear down to his corns. He had never seen anything to begin with that before. Now was the time to pile in the effects. I lifted my hands and groaned out this word, as it were in agony. Ahilstin oinomith eater castin sprin gun galtin saver shun gin, and turned on the red fire. You should have heard that Atlantic people moan and howl when the crimson hell joined the blue. Every 60 seconds I shouted, Mein Kampf, you bitch, and lit up the green fire. After waiting only 40 seconds this time, I spread my arms abroad and thundered out the devastating syllables of this word of words. Makam sul manam mesan mikenmor moren muter marmor moon mit markor.
Personal log. United States Army
And
Civil
whirled on the
Sergeant Michael
purple
Daly.
glow. There they were, all going at once, red, blue, green,
October
purple.
23rd.
4 furious volcanoes
West
pouring
Stockbridge.
vast clouds of radiant smoke aloft and spreading a blinding, rainbowed noonday to the furthest confines of that valley. In the distance, one could see that fellow on the pillar standing naked against the background of sky.
EMP following
His
nuclear
seesaw
detonation.
stopped for the first time in 20 years.
Several, in fact.
I knew the boys were at the pump now and
From the
ready,
intel
so I
I
said to the
gathered,
abbot,
this was
"The
a
time has come,
global
Father.
event.
I'm about to pronounce the dread name and command the spell to
Co-pilot
dissolve.
was killed on impact.
You want to brace up and take hold of something."
Pilot died of his injuries.
Then I
a day
shouted
later.
to the people, "Behold,
After that,
in another minute the spell will be
Clarity and
broken,
Cantor were
or
shot
no
by some
mortal can
scared,
break it. If it
desperate
break, all will
survivors.
know it. For you will see the sacred
Brzezinski
water
took
gush
off
from the
running.
chapel door."
Haven't seen him since.
I stood a few moments to let the hearers have a
Now,
chance to
it's my
spread my
turn to go
announcement to
AWOL.
those who couldn't hear,
That concept
and so
even applies
convey it to the
anymore.
furthest ranks. Then I made a
My
grand
armor's
exhibition of
burned
extra
out,
posturing
so
and gesturing,
guess my soldering
and
days
shouted,
are done.
"Lo, I command the fell spirit that possessed the holy fountain to now disgorge into the skies all the infernal fires that still remain in him, and straightway dissolve his spell and flee hence to the pit, there to lie bound 1,000 years.
God bless America.
By his own dread name I
Or
command
what's
it.
left of it.
Junk!" Then I touched off the hogshead of rockets, and a vast fountain of dazzling lances of fire vomited itself toward the zenith, and a hissing rush, and burst in mid-sky into a storm of flashing jewels. One mighty groan of terror started up from the massed people, then suddenly broke into a wild hosanna of joy. For there, fair and plain, in the uncanny glare, they saw the freed water leaping forth. The old abbot could not speak a word, for tears and the chokings in his throat, without utterance of any sort. He folded me in his arms and mashed me. It was more eloquent than speech, and harder to get over too, in a country where there were really no doctors that were worth the damaged nickel. You should have seen those acres of people throw themselves down at that water and kiss it and pet it, and fondle it and talk to it as if it were alive, and welcome it back with the dear names they gave their darlings, just as if it had been a friend who was long gone away and lost, and was come home again. Yes, it was pretty to see. It made me think more of them than I had done before. I sent Merlin home on a shutter. He had caved in and gone down like a landslide when I pronounced the fearful name, and had never came to sense. He never had heard that name before, neither had I, but him it was the right one. Any jumble would have been the right one. He admitted afterward that the spirit's own mother could not have pronounced that name better than I did. He never could understand how I survived it, and I didn't tell him. It is only a young magician that gave him a secret like that. Merlin spent 3 months working enchantments to try to find out the deep trick of how to pronounce that name and outlive it, but he didn't arrive. When I started to the chapel, the populace uncovered and fell back reverently to make a wide way for me, as if I had been some kind of a superior being, and I was. I was aware of that. I took along a night shift of monks and taught them the mystery of the pump, and set them to work, for it was plain that a good part of the people out there were going to sit up with the water all night. Consequently, it was but right that they should have all they wanted of it. To those monks, that pump was a good deal of a miracle itself, and they were full of wonder over it, and of admiration, too, of the exceeding effectiveness of its performance. It was a great night, an immense night. There was reputation that I could hardly get to sleep for glorifying over. End of the chapter. You can tell he was trying to take over. Someone stepped into the room right there. They start speaking whenever I start speaking. And they're using a bell to do it. They're using a bell to do it and amplifying their voice over mine. They have exact measurements. At this paragraph right here, these two, where it started. So we're going to go ahead and disprove any theory that you try to prove. Got it? I'm not arguing with you. You fucking fraud. This is the problem I'm having with this generation. You are more than frauds. You are delusional, deranged lunatics. Baby boomer, you are House of 1,000 Corpses. You. The shit you say does not make any sense. You are literally, you do what my mother does. And you say no and then you give nothing. You give no reason whatsoever. It's starting to reroute me right now. Whoever's on that, get off of it. That's why I'm doing this, bitch. You are in trouble. Yes, you are. You do what my mother does. You say no, and you don't get a reason. You need a reason for the things that you do, and you're not just going to start arresting people for no reason at all, just because you feel like it. Contempt of you. No. In English. And no, you're not going to come up with some key, lock and key, like the Patriot Act, that dissolves every fucking law in the book. We're not arguing with you. I promise you, I will get violent with you, dude. You're deranged lunatics, and it shows. You're definitely good slaves. I will give you that you are good workers. You will sit there for 12 fucking hours with a smile on your face. I will give you that. I think you wanted me to cut it short. It is getting kind of long. I do have more videos though. I'm enjoying it.